Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. Ausubel versus Brunner, the great debate. To really appreciate Ausubel, you have to look at the context of his time. In the 1960s and 70s, Jerome Brunner was the rock star of educational psychology. Brunner championed discovery learning. The vibe was that students should act like little scientists, exploring materials and discovering principles on their own. The teacher's job was to facilitate, not to lecture. Ausubel pushed back, hard. He argued that while discovery learning is great for very young children or for specific problem-solving tasks, it is incredibly inefficient for learning massive amounts of subject matter. Imagine if a medical student had to discover anatomy by themselves. It would take a lifetime. Ausubel defended reception learning, expository teaching. He argued that lectures and textbooks are not inherently bad. They only get a bad rap because they are often done poorly, leading to rote learning. But if a lecture is well organized, uses advanced organizers, and connects to prior knowledge, it is the most efficient way to transmit human culture and knowledge. He made a crucial distinction. Reception learning is not passive. Just because you are sitting and listening doesn't mean your brain is off. In meaningful reception learning, the learner is actively working to subsume the new info, compare it to old info, and reorganize their cognitive structure. It is cognitively active, even if the student is physically still. This is a massive validation for teachers who feel guilty for lecturing. Ausubel says, "Don't feel guilty. Just make sure your lecture is structured to hook into what they already know. Don't just dump data, build bridges." Misconceptions and pitfalls. It is easy to misinterpret Ausubel. One common pitfall is thinking that prior knowledge just means what we covered last week. But prior knowledge is idiosyncratic. It's personal. It includes the student's cultural background, their life experiences, and even their misconceptions. If a student has a wrong idea firmly planted in their head, a misconception acting as a subsumer, it can actually block meaningful learning. For example, if a student firmly believes that heavier objects always fall faster, and you try to teach them about gravity equations without addressing that belief, they will just memorize the equation for the test, but keep their wrong belief for real life. Ausubel would argue you need to bring that prior knowledge to the surface and destabilize it using a comparative organizer before the new concept can take root. Another misconception is that Ausubel hated discovery learning. He didn't. He just thought it was overused. He believed discovery was necessary for testing hypotheses and problem solving, but for the primary job of education, acquiring subject matter, meaningful reception learning was the gold standard, bringing Ausubel into the modern classroom. So how do we use this today? We aren't in the 1960s anymore, but the brain hasn't changed. Here are practical ways to bring Ausubel's theory to life in a modern setting. The big picture first. Never start a unit with vocabulary words or isolated facts. Start with a concept map or a hook that explains the why and the broad what. If you are teaching a novel, don't start by reading chapter 1. Start by discussing the major themes, e.g. betrayal, coming of age, that the students have likely experienced in their own lives. That theme is the anchor. 2. Use analogies relentlessly. Combinatorial learning is your best friend. If you are teaching how a cell membrane works, compare it to a nightclub bouncer, letting some in, keeping some out. If you are teaching government checks and balances, compare it to the rules of a sports game. These analogies bridge the gap between the known and the unknown. 3. The previously on recap. TV shows do this for a reason. Before starting a new lesson, spend 5 minutes deliberately activating prior knowledge. What did we say about photosynthesis yesterday? Okay, keep that in mind because today we're going to see what happens when that process breaks down. You are warming up the glue before you try to stick the new paper on the wall. 4. KWL charts. This is a classic tool that is pure Ausubel. A KWL chart asks students, what do I know? What do I want to know? And later, what did I learn? The K column is essential. It forces the student to scan their own cognitive structure and bring relevant subsumers to the forefront of their working memory. 5. Concept mapping. Ausubel loved hierarchy. Concept maps, bubble charts where lines connect ideas, are visual representations of cognitive structure. Having students build their own concept maps is one of the best ways to foster integrative reconciliation. It forces them to decide, does this idea go under that one, or is it next to it? That decision-making process is learning. The digital age and Ausubel. Interestingly, the internet has validated Ausubel in ways he probably never imagined. Think about Wikipedia. It is the ultimate example of meaningful learning theory in action. You land on a page, a specific concept. The first paragraph is a general summary, advanced organizer. Throughout the text, there are blue hyperlinks. These links represent the connections to other concepts in the cognitive structure, integrative reconciliation. When we browse the web, we are constantly navigating a web of supraordinate, subordinate, and combinatorial links. However, the danger of the internet is that it provides information without requiring the user to build the structure. It's easy to fall into a copy-paste mentality, which is the digital equivalent of rote learning. Teachers today have the difficult task of helping students build the internal mental structure to handle the external flood of data. At the end of the day, Ausubel's meaningful learning theory is a call to empathy. It asks the educator to get inside the learner's head. It demands that we respect what the student brings to the table. We cannot treat students like empty vessels waiting to be filled. They are complex webs of existing knowledge, experiences, and beliefs. If we ignore that web, we are just throwing seeds on concrete. We might get short-term results, a passing grade, a completed worksheet, but we won't get long-term retention. We won't get understanding. To teach effectively, we must first figure out where the hooks are. We have to identify the anchors. We have to build the bridges. It takes more time on the front end to design an advanced organizer or to map out the hierarchy of a curriculum, but the payoff is massive. When a student finally gets it, when you see that light bulb turn on, it's because the new piece of the puzzle just snapped into place with a satisfying click. That is meaningful learning. It sticks. It matters. And as educators, that is exactly what we are shooting for. So, the next time you step in front of a classroom or plan a training session, ask yourself the question that defined David Ausubel's career. What do they already know, and how can I use that to help them learn what they don't? The answer to that question is the key to unlocking human potential.